Hi y'all, welcome back to my podcast called Holy Tea. This is where we're sharing the general overview of the Old Testament and, of course, all the tea that it holds. So, my name is Hailey Groen and welcome to my podcast. So, we of course have the general, we have creation with Adam and Eve, the fall where he eats the fruit and just sin enters the world, and then we have the flood with Noah and the little animals going 2 by 2. So, but where I really want us to start and hone in on is the patriarch. So this is around the 2nd millennial BC. So, Job is a key element in this story, and his story is the one of endurance. Despite God allowing the devil to personally test him, he endured and remained faithful to God, which is just incredible. He loses everything. He loses his wife, his family, everything, but he stays faithful. So, before we get to the next period, we have, of course, the books of Exodus, the law, the wilderness wandering, so 40 years in the wilderness. We have the conquest and the judges. So those are all the things that occur between Job and their next season, which is the United Kingdoms. And no, it's nothing like England or that. So, in this period, we have the kings. So the first one is Saul. Saul is the one appointed when Israel was like, God, we need a leader, we need a king. And so God sees Saul's heart, and at the beginning, he is fine. But then later, he eventually gets demon possessed and kind of falls off the bandwagon. So, he turns into kind of a wicked king, and then God sees the wickedness and corruption of his heart and has it in him to appoint a new person, which is David, after God's own heart. And David actually defeats Goliath, which is the enemy that Saul was supposed to conquer, but he had David do it for him. And as a return, Saul promised David his daughter, and his daughter ran away. It was a big thing, and so eventually David inherits the throne, or takes over the throne. So then after David, we have the books of Psalm, and this is mainly the worship that Israel has. So the lament and prayers and songs to God. And it's really cool that we still sing these today, and we have Psalms 23, all that. Beautiful. And then, of course, after David, we have Solomon. And Solomon is the wise king. He asks God for the gift of wisdom, and God gives it to him. But slowly, after he builds Yahweh's temple, he slowly goes a little bit crazy, and he ends up taking 700 wives. So there's definitely tea in that. And then after Solomon, we have the books of Proverbs, Ecclesiastes, and the Song of Solomon. So Proverbs is all about wisdom and folly, making the right choices in your life. And Ecclesiastes sees the day. Anyone heard of that? So this is appreciation on your short life, and it's recognizing it and seeing it as a gift that God has given us. And then, of course, we have the Song of Solomon, which is about 2 lovely people in love and all of the love. Very interesting read. So then under Solomon, we have a divided kingdom. So this is where the tribes of Israel aren't agreeing, and there's just a lot of stress, and so they split. with Solomon's oh my goodness, and Rehoboam's falling. So Israel ends up splitting. And then, so that leads into the pre-exilic period. So this is around the 8th century of that. We have the books of Jonah, Amos, Hosea, Isaiah, and Micah. So Jonah, we all know Jonah. It's all about forgiveness. And, well, Jonah, he gets the one that gets swallowed by the big fish and refuses God. But then, after God destroys his favorite tree, he listens to God and saves Nineveh from the destruction of their ways. And then we have Amos. So I feel like the book really emphasizes social justice. So that's wicked Israelite, rich, take advantage of all the poor. And so that's him writing and restoring that justice system. And then we have Hosea, which is all about faithfulness. So in the book of Hosea, we have his wife that runs away and is considered a prostitute. And Hosea runs after his wife and gets her and restores her glory and honor. And this is very much like Israel and God's relationship, where Israel runs away constantly, but God brings it back to him, and that is beautiful. And then we have Isaiah, new creation, and just a whole lot of prophecies that are just amazing. And so he prophesies that Israel is beyond healing, and only death and resurrection can save them, which is amazing. And that is what we're going to be exploring in the New Testament. And so, after Isaiah, we have Micah, which is about walking with God. So what God desires us to do: justice, love mercy, walk humbly with God. And this is the time period that the northern half of Israel is exiled from Israel by Assyria. So that's very important. So then we have the 7th century, and this is mainly with Joel and the locusts and Nahum, which is the Nineveh fell back into its wicked ways, and as a result, God had to destroy it, and that is the book of Nahum. And then Habakkuk, which is all about how the just and the ones after God's own heart should live by faith. And then, of course, we have Zephaniah, the day of the Lord. So that's more on like the judgment of wickedness and justice for the righteous. So all that happens in the pre-exilic period. So that's the 8th and 7th century. And then you actually have the exile period, which is in the 6th century. So this happens in 3 waves. So you start with Daniel and the New Kingdom. So God lowers and elevates all of the new kingdoms, and so that happens. And then we have Ezekiel, which is new life. So Israel will be resurrected like dry bones and given a new heart and new spirit. So then we have Jeremiah, who establishes a new covenant. So after the exile, God will renew his covenant with Israel and Judah. And in that time period, in the time period of Jeremiah, you have Lamentations, which is hope through sorrow. So that is all of the Israelites' sorrow that Jerusalem has been destroyed, but their hope and trust and faith in God and that Israel will survive. Then, after that, we have the post-exile period. So that is around the 6th to 4th century BC. So the post-exile period starts with Obadiah. So Edom refuses to help his brother Judah when Babylon is attacked. So Edom will be destroyed. And then this is when the exile is finally lifted by Cyrus's decree of return. So there are 3 waves of return. Just as there were 3 waves kind of going out, there are 3 waves coming in. And this starts with Zerubbabel. He rebuilds the temple. And this restores hope and restores that faith that they can go back to Israel. And this is around 520 to 15 BC. And then after that, we have Haggai, who also rebuilds. He finishes rebuilding the temple. And then we have Zechariah. So that is the return. So the exile is officially over, and Israel is returning to Jerusalem. So that is the time period that also Esther is the queen of Persia who saves all the Jews. She's an absolute diva, and we love her. And then after that, we have Ezra, and he restores the law. And then Nehemiah, who rebuilds the wall. So, and then to finish it all off, wrap it up with a big bow, we have Malachi. And that is God recognizing the judgment and the wickedness that Israel has fallen into. But he also kind of bridges it into the New Testament by promising a messenger, a Messiah, giving hope and renewal for the future and for Israel. And overall, it is so beautiful, and it's just amazing how, looking back on it, especially knowing that all of these events occurred in the order that they occurred, was just amazing. And so I hope that this podcast has gotten you a little bit interested in all the tea and all the drama that happened over the time period of the Old Testament. There is a lot to cover. There's decades, absolute decades of knowledge and just things that events and of course the books of the Bible. And so I hope that this little brief overcap has really opened your eyes and sparked some curiosity in you to dive in, and I always say to really get into it yourself, and that is how you will learn best. And so I hope that you have had a wonderful time listening to the Holy Tea, and have a good night. Cheers.